All right, good morning, everyone. It is 9:30. I'll call the meeting to order. Did everyone have a minute to look or opportunity to look at the minutes? Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes then? Jim, Matt, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so solid waste and recycling, our first item on the agenda is defining ad hoc committee role and responsibilities. Does anyone have any suggestions or where they'd like to see that ad hoc committee concentrate their time? Yeah, absolutely.
There you go, got it.
Jim, I think everyone's got a copy now. Would you like to go over this?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just put together a few things that, if you recall, when we first started this process, we wanted to form stakeholders groups. And then when I made the recommendation to form the ad hoc committee, these are kind of the items that we've been talking about all along. And then things have evolved from then. So the first four items are just looking at efficiencies at the landfill, and that was part of what Cornerstone talked about. And then the alternate evaluations would be like the status. You know, what we talked about is the five, I think, issues that we wanted to address. And under the private public, I'm just saying that we use the Casella proposal as a comparison for other options because it's kind of a baseline. And then the public intermunicipal partnership Onondaga County, they gave us a proposal, so that could be sort of a baseline there too. And then, of course, increasing permit limits to a level that's cost effective. I'm not sure that we had that on the original Cornerstone. And then waste diversion evaluation. the evolving technologies that I don't want to talk about right now because it's kind of a executive session thing that we've been talking about. So that might, at some point, I'm not sure now, be rolled in, and then recycling possibilities, maybe. I know Greg has talked about, possibilities of single stream and other things that we might be able to do. Leachate options and technologies, and then transfer station options, and really civic impact there. I know that's a hot topic for a lot of our towns. And so the basis for a lot of this, instead of trying to make up our own way to go, the basis should be the Cornerstone report and maybe the Casella proposal and recommendations by the Solid Waste Administration. So that was my input anyway. It's a proposal, it's not our draft, it's not
Yeah.
cast in stone.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Evan? I saw you slowly going for the mic.
Yeah, I'm going for the mic here. And, I think these are all, these are obviously the topics that are all very important to this committee. And I've just been struggling with like, how do we separate out what the Solid Waste Committee does versus what, let's call it a working group, is advising. And also, that would be my thought, would be that we would try to maybe pick out a couple of these that we would ask the working group to focus on. And that we need to, once we decided that, because some of these things are, Greg's going to be working on this, or whoever's, our management is going to be working on it. The committee needs to be very well versed in this ourselves. And some of these things are pretty technical, right? And so far as I know, I don't think there's a lot of technical expertise or people that raised their hand and said, hey, I'm an engineer, environmental engineer, and I want to serve on this ad hoc committee, or whatever we calling it. So unless we beef up that committee or hire staff to support them or hire experts to support them, I don't know how they can do these things. That's my only question. So that's what I'm struggling with. I mean, I think all these topics are very important. Maybe we need to prioritize them, and then pick out a couple that would go to the working group and ask them to focus on that. That would be my suggestion. But I don't know the process of doing that. I don't know how to, I would love to hear what everybody else is thinking on this. So.
I don't disagree with you, man. And Jim, thank you for doing all this. This
Yeah.
is good stuff. We need to make sure we prioritize what we want them to look at first, because this is a lot of stuff right here.
Mhm.
And of course, we've been doing this for years, right? So maybe if we could pare it down a little bit, because if I'm walking into this without any information or history like we around this horseshoe have, it might be a little bit too much to digest, or at least maybe we as a committee could prioritize it. That's all I'm saying.
Anyone else? Greg, any suggestions on your end?
Well, on a committee, looking at action items, and setting a timeline on them, right? Especially when you're looking at tip fee alternatives. Right, we're going to be continuing down that path because we do have some fiscal stress and stressors. So how do we continue down, making some corrections now, and not letting a working group feel that they're going against the grain, right? Creating a task for them that, putting parameters and timelines on that it may be a future type thing that helps rectify what we have to do today. So not binding the administration or the operations with the now tasks as a committee or working group looks at the future and right sizing or efficiently correcting rates or operations. So just time parameters on any of these would be really good, but you do have, this group will have a great working source and documents to work from with Cornerstone report, because it does, both of those reports mention all of these items here other than the Okra proposal. So it was a great start.
Thank you. I think what we should do is really get once we get the group together, do a tour up at the landfill and maybe have some preliminary discussions and background to give everyone a little up to date on things that we know might be helpful.
Like giving them the Cornerstone report to read and those types of things.
Yeah, a little bit of homework.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yes.
Which might not be so dumb, but how do you see this working group working? So let's say you pick people that are, meet your qualifications and you plop them down with a Cornerstone. How do you see them working through this? Do you see county staff working with them? Do you see, at their meetings and making sure the tasks get done? I mean, how do you envision that?
I think with, I know with my committees that I've formed in my township, that, of course, they're just an advisory committee. So we bring up an issue, we discuss it. And sometimes maybe the public would have a different view than we would. And I know that sometimes my town board doesn't want to do what they want to do, but at times they do. They bring up things that we hadn't thought about, like the transfer stations maybe. And then we
I
bring
don't
in-
have a problem with
Yeah.
that. I'm just thinking logistically, how's it
Oh.
gonna work? So like when you have a working group in the town, do you have somebody from the town working with them, or do you just set them on their course and say, here you go?
No, we always have 2 town board members, and then we form a committee of 5 or 7. And then they come back to our town with recommendations. And sometimes we'll support them. Like right now we're working on some new land use laws. And so we will bring in an engineer or whatever that may have an idea on those land use laws that we hadn't thought of, and we'll hire them to bring them in. And I see the same group if we wanted to bring in, say, Hans Arnold that does this sort of stuff at some point, because this is a volunteer group, right? So we're trying to keep our costs to a minimum, but then if we come to an impasse on an item that just doesn't seem to be, we're getting anywhere with, we bring in an expert or we bring in Greg and explain it in greater detail so that I think the group gets it. So I think this is part of a stakeholders thing as well, as like educating people and understanding and getting their point of view, which we might not have a part of.
The last working group that was appointed by then Chairman Becker back in 2012 was the Natural Gas Working Group, which was chaired by Roger Bradstreet. Dan DeGear was vice chair. Darren Ball was the supervisor. Martha Conway was the secretary for the group. Daryl Griff was there representing the Farm Bureau. Scott Igmeyer, staff planning director. Stephen Keys was for MKey, so he was representing the gas industry. Steve Lorraine was Madison County Soil and Water Conservation District. Christopher Nyberg was the Dean of Agriculture and Natural Resources from Morrisville State College. Bruce Selleck, and then Jeff Snyder, who was the director for the Environmental Health Division at Public Health. And they had a mission to provide a sense of order to the process where safety and environment are paramount, while keeping in mind the economic impact as a factor, provide a voice for Madison County residents and place for them to register concerns, and serve as a central communications point for residents and gas companies to share information. And they had different reports and stuff. They were kind of tasked with doing a research. They did research and they reported back to the committee on their findings. I found some stuff that Roger put together with some help from different people. And then the thing kind of all fell apart once the governor put a moratorium and said, we're not doing hydrofracking in New York State, and that all just went away. But that's a pretty succinct group. I'm not sure. I know that John has I think there was 14 applications that came through to the chairman. I know he interviewed those folks. There's a list. I've seen it, and but I don't know that he's made any decisions on that yet, and he's not here to speak for that, so. But there's a big list, and a lot of people with a lot of different varying experiences and backgrounds from what I saw. But it's big. That's the
Mhm.
biggest. There's a lot of people that have an interest in it.
Yeah, I think maybe, you know, our committee should at least recommend that we keep it, that recommend to the chair that we keep the size of the committee smaller, so it's a more effective group. And I don't, you know, and then, you know, just try to find people that have, maybe put some staff on it. I mean, in addition to Greg, I don't, you know, there are water issues, right? Water concerns, environmental issues that people are worried about that live around the landfill, water and air quality. So I don't know whether anyone from the rest of our staff from the public health department should sit on that committee or, you know, I hate to task Scott Ingmeyer with any additional tasks, but, you know, his department can look at, you know, there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. So I think maybe we definitely need to have Greg be part of the committee so that he's there.
Hey, Greg was one of the 14 that was on the list, but there's
Right.
no staff on that list. So it's just 14 people, 13 from the public,
Right.
Is that
plus
include-
Greg, and then you add in, and I agree with you 100%, somebody from health department, Scott, sorry, Cindy or Luann, but from the finance side. And now you're going from 14 to like 18, 19 people.
Well, I don't know if necessarily Scott and Cindy and those department heads need to be at every meeting.
Yeah, I guess it depends, but I know like,
Yeah.
but I know that Scott and, you know, and Jeff Snyder, you know, from the staff
Yeah.
standpoint, were at the meetings because they had an
Yeah.
area of expertise.
And then
It-
two
it maybe
supervisors.
depends too on what you're tasking with initially.
Right. You know, I was pretty involved in the gas issue because we formed a gas coalition in southern Madison County with landowners. And basically at that point, the public was extremely worried about the environmental impact of, you know, gas development. And so there were a million questions and a lot of people were really upset. So one of the things that working group did was provide that information back out to the public. And because they had Martha Conway, I can't remember the name of that paper that she published. Okay,
Courier,
right.
Sun
That's
Courier.
it. The Courier. I don't know whether, I think she just had a lot of PI experience. But we have Sam, not to drop anything more on Sam, but we need to, I think public information, getting whatever findings this group makes would be really helpful, because again, it's about letting the public know what's going on. And if they have concerns that have been articulated, that comes to the committee and that those concerns are addressed. So I think
Mhm.
public information is a very good charge for the committee. Once they actually have solid information to share back, that would be helpful. And I kind of like I like the idea of that we would, you know, in collaboration with that committee, if we get to a technical issue that we need to hire somebody to come in and give us advice, give advice to the group, and then that gets that advice comes back to the solid waste committee. That makes sense to me. Because we're not going to get professionals to volunteer and serve on this committee. Professionals that get paid to do this stuff. I don't think any of the people that are on that. I don't know, Mark, you've seen the names. Is anyone a professional engineer or a waste management engineer? One person.
There was one engineer on
Right,
there. Yeah.
exactly, right. So I don't know, I think if we add that to the charge, you know, public information and research, and then we pick out a couple of these topics that we want them to focus on first, that would be a good starting point.
Mhm.
One more point, and to Greg's point, the other thing is, you know, this committee still needs to do our job and move forward and you know, so for example, the tipping fee. If we have a recommendation for a tipping fee change as a committee, I would rather not wait. If you want to do that right away, you know, the tipping fee is not a lifetime number, right? So it could go up again, it could go back down, depending on what happens, but we've got to stop the bleeding. And we all agree with that. So I just don't want to let it. So maybe some of this stuff, we're going to continue doing our jobs at the same time. Right. So,
Absolutely.
I just want to make sure I make the point that
Yeah, and I
don't
know,
wait too long unless if there's a decision that we all agree on as the solid waste committee
Yeah, and
or the
based
board
on-
of supervisor.
based on the last committee meeting, Greg had to charge to go back and look at the tipping fees again because we didn't like the numbers, the committee didn't like the numbers that Greg had. And Greg and I have we met with folks from Real Property about, a kind of dual model with tipping fees, and then this Otsego County, Tompkins County, Melissa's helping with it as well. So we'll have some good really good information for the committee at the next regular meeting on a kind of counter proposal from what Greg had, where not looking at 130 on the tipping fee side, but some good numbers to help on the operational side. And then looking at this Otsego County model, there's a lot of work to be done on that, and that wouldn't go into place until January of 26. But Greg's got some really good stuff to share at the next meeting on the tipping fee part.
Any other suggestions that we could pass on to the chairman for putting the committee together? And its focus. I think the 14 is going to be quite a big number and be very difficult.
If you have some specific thoughts, I think that probably that would be a good thing to put on the, put out there for the chairman. So he's got what you want him to do. Not that he's going to do what you want him to do, but he'll know where you're coming from. And you asked him to form this committee, so be as specific as possible. That's the lawyer in me. Right?
Right. What if we said 4 members of the public and 2 supervisors? Because I think that's about all you're going to get at this point.
Yeah, I think
5 and 2. Yeah.
if it's
fine.
in the board rules, it is actually specifically says that any working group or ad hoc has to include a minimum of 3 supervisors.
Okay.
Which actually,
fine.
borders. I just saw that for the first time there.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. So 5 and 3. That's not too big. 8 is not too many. I don't think that's too many.
We can do 3 because it won't be quorum for solid waste, so.
And they have to have 3?
That's what the rule said.
The rule says has to have 3. Okay. And then 5 members of the
Up to
public,
5 members.
up to 5?
It's a committee or working group.
It's defined ad hoc.
It's an ad- Yeah.
Can,
You could change it to working group. I like that. Evan and I talked about that today, and I like that better than ad hoc committee because I think it's.
Well,
That's what it was for natural gas.
at the because we have a history of doing it that way, but also because to distinguish from the already existing ad hoc committee, I think it's super confusing to the
Mhm.
public.
Mhm.
And I'm sure the ad hoc committee of citizens that have already formed, they're not going to go away. They're not going to change their name. We can't ask them to change their name. That's their thing. So let's name ours. That would be my recommendation, to name it the working group on whatever, landfill operations or waste management alternative. I don't know what's working group on on the Madison County landfill,
Yeah, solid waste and recycling.
solid waste and
management.
recycling. Thank you.
So it's a special committees may be appointed by the board or the chair of the board and consists of a minimum of 3 board members unless the board shall otherwise determine. But it's not a special committee. So if it's a working group, I think you can have as many supervisors or as little as you want.
Without us getting a quorum.
I think so. Because this is special committee. It's not a special working.
Right. If we make
So-
it a working group, I mean, we could also, there might be other, maybe there are other supervisors from other, that are on the board that are not on the solid waste committee that might be interested. Maybe that would be helpful. I don't know. Where did Pete go? Wasn't he
Mhm.
just here? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Sorry. Rex is so big today that he's covering up. You were leaning forward. I literally. Okay, thank you for your input. Oh,
All
7.
All right, so I'll talk to the chairman, up to 5 members of the public, 3 supervisors. What about any staff or employees? As needed? Thoughts on Greg being there?
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. Greg, are you okay with joining?
Yes, ma'am.
I should ask before I volunteered you.
So he's not an as needed, he's needed.
Yes, I want to make sure that you are needed. I'm gonna
You're
put Greg
definitely needed.
Needed. All right, anything else that we want to suggest to the chairman?
What's the time frame on this thing? Are we talking months from now or?
No.
Months.
When,
I'd say I would, personal opinion, with the next 30 days, but
Yeah.
I think we could talk to, Liz could talk to John. He'll be here this afternoon and we have a board meeting on Tuesday, so we could chat a little bit also on Tuesday and hopefully get that announcement like sooner rather than later.
Yep, and then we can get meetings set up and
Yeah.
get rolling on it.
How about topics? I mean, I'm looking at Jim's list and to me, the things that most that seem to make sense to me are under the waste diversion evaluation. Maybe that's the
Mhm.
wrong topic for it, but those are evolving technological considerations, recycling possibilities. I mean, recycling is, we're losing money. Leachate options, that's going to be a big technological issue, right? Between the regulations and, I mean, that's an area that I'd really love to have us select an expert comes in, focuses on a couple of options and really informs the public and the committee and then the solid waste committee. And transfer station cost options and civic impact. I know Greg's talked about, we need maybe different equipment out there that will make it much more efficient. And so I would love to see how other transfer stations work in other communities. So I would focus on those 4 and see if,
Why don't we break it down so that we start with waste diversion, if everyone's in agreement, waste diversion evaluation as the first chunk, and then they can break it down even further. Whichever one, say recycling possibilities and costs first, or whatever we decide.
right, or maybe the committee itself wants
Yeah.
to brainstorm about it and what do they think is the most, I mean, we can make a recommendation, but I think
Right.
on some level, we have to give the committee its head to go after what they think is important. There has
So
to
we
be a
can-
balance.
Yeah, we can break it up so that that's first, and then start second working committee recommendations, the improvements on top, and then alternative evaluation last.
They'll be meeting for years. So I don't know.
At least to have some sort of direction.
Yeah, sure.
Did I get louder? I did get louder.
Someone can have a mic.
Oh. Thank you, Jim, for setting this up. This recommendation.
Melissa, what did
Yep.
you recommend for a second? Oh, what did we do with the volume here?
Tina must have heard me.
Touch it.
We just gotta sit back. I was thinking going back up to the top to where he started with the working committee recommendations as far as improvements and alternatives, and then going to the third for alternative evaluations.
Yeah, I mean, I think the alternative evaluations is really a job of this committee, frankly, our committee, the solid waste committee, but I think the other things are
Mhm.
topics of research that would be helpful. So I would,
I think this might keep everyone really busy. This is a big list.
yes, it is.
And a lot of work. But at least this gives us a starting point and some direction on where to go.
I like to jump in too and just say, starting with the diversion evaluation. That all fits in, right? It fits into how we're gonna operate, how we're gonna fund things, what waste, right? Our overall arching goal is waste diversion, waste minimization first, right? And then dealing with the residual from whether it's residual from recycling or from our households. So this is a great thing. I mean, our predecessors had worked on looking at alternative technologies, whether it was plastics to oil and all that, as a fit. And this is where they come in. And they can bring that piece, that financial piece, that the county's not on the financial hook for these technologies to come in. So it is a great starting point because it affects your efficiencies in what you're handling down the line. And your alternative analysis down the line too, because you then are looking at the volume and the waste you're going to be handling.
All right, anything else from anyone before we move on?
Melissa, if I could just.
Yes,
I'm just looking at this and, I think we can all agree that trash is trash, anything that's going on the pile. And so as far as the waste diversion, I think that's a good place to start, especially because recycling and transfer stations, the amount of money we're losing there. But I think we should also relate our three operations, the garbage, recycling, transfer stations, but anything outside of the pile itself, what's that costing us in terms of number of employees? And I mean, because that's stretching us out away from home base. So anything that's really stretching us out away from just taking care of garbage that, just goes on the pile and we can manage that. But all these other things that are really have some significant costs, monetary and as far as labor, and how maybe we can be more efficient in those areas. So that's
Mhm.
just my thoughts.
yeah. Anyone else? Jim, Tom, you guys, anything else? Matt? All right. Well, then I will entertain a motion, please, to enter into executive session for matters related to financial or employee history of our particular employee incorporate. Thank you. Second? TJ? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. You're in executive.